Hello, hockey fans, and welcome to another edition of Anatomy of a Season. We have covered three champions, the 93 Habs, the 97 Red Wings, and the 83 Islanders. And then we went the complete opposite in our last episode with the 89-90 Quebec Nordiques. Well, we have a tale almost as tragic, a tale that will no doubt leave you weeping more than viewing Steel Magnolias for the first time. That is of... yes. The 1981-82 Toronto Maple Leafs. Just take a look at this picture. The lady who worked at the photo lab where this was developed almost sent this to Kingston Penitentiary, thinking it was likely the yearly prison Christmas photo. But hey, team owner Harold Ballard is smiling. I guess he cashed a check that day. But of course, to lead up to this season of sadness, we need context, so here's a backstory. Oh, indeed. A much happier and simpler time for the Toronto Maple Leafs. 1967, a year that brings joy and sorrow whenever it is mentioned. A group known as the Over the Hill Gang shocked both the heavily favored Chicago Blackhawks and the two-time defending champion Montreal Canadiens to win the Stanley Cup. And get a load of this talent. The Big M, Frank Mahovlich, who is one of the best players in the game. And let's see, we also have Red Kelly, Tim Horton, yes, that Tim Horton, team captain George Armstrong, Bob Pulford, Alan Stanley, Marcel Pronovo, and a duo of goaltenders that would be a dream team for anyone to have, Johnny Bower and Terry Sawchuk. And let's throw in playoff MVP, consummate trophy winner Dave Keon. That's 10, count them 10 Hall of Famers. You also have greats like Jim Pappen, Ron Ellis, Pete Stemkowski, and clear the track, it's Eddie Shack. And plus you have Hall of Fame coach and miserable-ass tyrant, but a successful one, Punch Imlach. Now, nobody can dispute this team's success, but when your champions are called the Over the Hill Gang, you know the good times aren't always going to last unless you make some changes. And within the next year, those good times already came to an end. And yes, expansion did indeed hit the NHL. 6 new teams, meaning they were going to lose lots of players. Bob Bond and Terry Sawchuk were most notable in that regard. And hey, you see this guy right here? This is Frank Mahovlich, multi-time All-Star, who Punch Imlach targeted regularly despite being one of his best players. And despite the fact that also the fickle Toronto media and fans picked on him as well. Yeah, okay, 2-time first-team All-Star, 4-time second-team All-Star, just with Toronto alone. Yeah, this Mahovlich guy sucks. Well, thanks to old miserable Punch, who is much less charming a version of Clint Eastwood in Gran Torino at this point, trades his star to Detroit, but gets Norm Ullman, who, to be fair, is a Hall of Famer himself, and was one of the greats of this era. The Leafs, however, missed the playoffs in 1968. See, Pal Hal, Harold Ballard, wasn't the only bad man steering this ship. So was Stafford Smythe, the son of Leafs builder Conn Smythe. And Stafford was more or less AJ Soprano to Conn's Tony, had AJ gone into the waste management business. The RCMP raided the Gardens, and he and Ballard were charged with tax evasion, determining that they were taking money from Maple Leaf Gardens Limited to pay for housing expenses. I'm sure Pal Hal really needed the money to pay off the help who likely went blind by seeing him in his bathrobe. But John Bassett, who had controlling stake over the Leafs, and the Board of Governors voted 8-7 to have them removed. Also being fired with no vote was Punch Imlach. Bassett had grown tired of him shouting at clouds. His time with Toronto, after over a decade, was done. Hey, things improved at least. They made the playoffs the following year. Keon and Ullman are great. So is a youngster by the name of Paul Henderson. And so is goaltender Bruce Gamble. But things again stink. Sorry, did I say stink? I meant to say stink. No, wait, stink is pretty accurate. The Leafs missed the playoffs in 1969-70. This team is hanging on to their older talent. Plus, they have a really crappy minor league goaltender by the name of Gerry McNamara, who had a goal just against average of over 5. Well, it's the worst he's going to do to this organization, I guess. But hey, with the 8th overall pick, the Leafs took some kid from the London Knights by the name of Darryl Sittler in the draft. And look, another old guy goaltender. Okay, well, Jacques Plante, who to be fair was actually still really good at this point in his career. And GM Jim Gregory seems to be, at the very least, trying to give this team some structure, along with coach Jim McClellan. And they do make the playoffs. Ullman, Keon, Henderson, and Ellis are playing great hockey. And in addition to Plante, they have a promising young goaltender by the name of Bernie Parent. However, during this time, since Ballard and Smythe still had shares, they were able to get back in power, and Bassett actually ended up selling his shares to them. However, Pal Hal went to the Slammer, a minimum security one at that, and I wonder if he joined the Robo team to go up against the Princeton alum. Princeton? Yeah. But hey, Stafford Smythe was able to avoid prison because he died at the mere age of 50 on October 13, 1971. The Leafs didn't have a first-round draft pick in 1971, but they made a pretty good pick in the second round, followed by the name of Rick Kehoe. And they made the playoffs again. Hey! And look at that, Sittler and Keon have a breakout year, but the Leafs have lost goaltender Bernie Perron to rival league WHA. And Ullman misses 15 games, Henderson misses half the season. And hey, look at this 1973 draft! Lanny McDonald taking 4th overall? Well, he'll do pretty good, I guess. And ooh, a Swedish import named Borje Salming, a European player in the NHL? And hey, I'm not even being cute, back then it was almost unheard of. But I'm sure he'll do alright. And hey, what do you know? He has a really good rookie season. The Leafs returned to the playoffs in 73-74 with a new head coach and former Leafs legend Red Kelly, and Harold Ballard is out of jail. Hot dog. 1974-75. Hey, Ballard goes to war with team captain and 15-year veteran, and the most popular player, one of the most popular players in Leaf history, the man who kept this team together, Dave Keon. Ballard criticized Keon's leadership, and the two were at odds over money. The Leafs barely get into the playoffs with a losing record, and get used to hearing that. Ballard drives Keon out of Toronto and into the WHA, and proceeds to make his life hell for the next decade, even though he's not playing for the Leafs anymore. Speaking of which, Ballard also goes to war with WHA's Toronto Toros. The Leafs in 1975-76 do have much to write home about. Most notable is Darryl Sittler's 10-point game, still an NHL record. He also had 5 goals in a playoff game against the Flyers. He's the first Leaf to score 100 points this season. That Lanny McDonald guy, well, he has 93. And hey, Salming is playing some of the best defensive hockey in the league. Fellow blue liner Ian Turnbull has his moments too. You also have talent such as Errol Thompson, the scrappy Tiger Williams, and a decent goaltender by the name of Wayne Thomas. However, this team is stagnant in 1976-77, but good for you, pal Hal. Aside from making misogynistic, bigoted, and ridiculous remarks to the media, and throwing Foster Hewitt's storied gondola into an incinerator, you successfully drove the Toronto Toros to Birmingham, Alabama. That'll show the son of John Bassett, who is the team's president, and that no good Frank Mahovlich and Paul Henderson, just who's boss. Haha. Tired of the team not making any progress, however, Red Kelly was axed. But they finally brought in someone who can take this team to a whole new level, and hey, for once I'm not being sarcastic. It's Roger Neilson, an innovative hockey mind who had great success as a coach of the Peterborough Petes of the OHL Junior League, gets his first pro job. And what do you know? This 1977-78 Leafs team responds to him. He puts all the puzzle pieces in the right places. Salming and Sittler are two of the best in the game. Tiger Williams gives the team grittiness, but also has a scoring touch. Ron Ellis, one of the few men left from that 67 squad, is still producing. On defense, well, Salming seems to be a yearly contender for the Norris Trophy. Ian Turnbull puts up some pretty good numbers. They have a promising youngster in goal by the name of Mike Palmatier, and let's not forget another promising defenseman named Randy Carlisle. The Leafs finished with 92 points, one of their best seasons in franchise history, and their absolute best since their Cup win. They actually managed to upset the New York Islanders in the playoffs, but they got swept out by the Montreal Canadiens, and you really can't blame the Leafs on that one. It's Montreal, it's 1978, come on. The Cup was practically handed to the Habs in this era before the season even started. Yes, sir, the Leafs are in for a bright future, aren't they? Ballard, ugh. Leafs did okay in 1978-79, but now Ballard and Neilson are at odds. Neilson was fired, but oddly enough didn't miss a game during his quote-unquote firing. Ballard thought it'd be funny for Neilson to return with a paper bag over his head to be the mystery coach. I can't make this up. Anyway, the Leafs do so-so and make the playoffs again. They upset Atlanta in a preliminary round series, but that's as good as it gets. Neilson is gone, and so is GM Jim Gregory. But hey, don't worry. Ballard has a solution to all this. Punch Imlach? Yes, Imlach is the new GM. Well, they say misery loves company, and Ballard just found it. In addition to fighting with super agent hockey czar Alan Eagleson over player deals, mainly Darryl Sittler's, and yes, the joke of Crooked Hal and Crooked Al fighting over the integrity of money kind of writes itself. But of course, Ballard, was one of the owners who tried to stop the WHA's Oilers, Whalers, Nordiques, and Jets from entering the NHL. Haha, man, our boy Harold Ballard fighting a good fight. And the coach of the team would be Floyd Smith. Now, together, Imlach and Smith actually made the Sabres into a contender within 5 years. But of course, Imlach drove ownership up the wall and was axed. So yes, what a happy family. Imlach can do Ballard's bidding, and Smith can be Imlach's lapdog. Oh, this is going to work out great. And yes, Sittler was not happy about a lot of things. He didn't like Imlach, for one. Imlach didn't like him. His appearance in the 1979-80 season got underway, as Sittler was also very upset about Roger Neilson's firing. The Leafs were a mess, micromanaging, tyranny, and oh yes, trades out of spite. You see, Darryl Sittler had a no-trade clause which he refused to waive. So what do? They trade one of their best players and Darryl's close friend, Lanny McDonald, for Will Paymont, who was a great talent but not worth a Lanny McDonald. But hey, yeah, you showed him punch. The Leafs slip into the playoffs with a losing record. That'll teach you, Sittler. Also to be a part of the players' union that Harold Ballard and I can't stand. How dare you? Oh, you and your players have any rights? I'm Punch Imlach, damn it. Tiger Williams was also traded, which angered Leaf fans, but at least this one made some sense. They got a young forward by the name of Rick Vye from Vancouver in return. That just can't hurt. Next. Well, we head into the 1980-81 season. Goaltender Mike Palmatier has gone to Washington. Salming is carrying this sad defense on his back. Sittler, while still good, gave up his captaincy the prior season, but hey, he has again for this one. Also at this point, Sittler and agent Alan Eagleson were willing to waive the no-trade clause for the right deal, but Imlach kept saying, nah. Also, Imlach's lingering heart problems were an issue, but he still continued to run the team into the ground. But hey, the Leafs squeak into the playoffs in the 1980-81 season with a losing record. Next! Oh wait, that's now. You're probably wondering that certainly the Leafs must have young prospects who developed into a formidable team that if they can just get the right people running this damn place well, they could be a prominent contender. Well, here are their first-round draft picks since 1973. Ah, yes, that Lanny McDonald guy who, after 7 years in Toronto, then a short stint with the Colorado Rockies, continued his Hall of Fame career in Calgary and won a Stanley Cup. I've covered him extensively on this channel. Check out those videos. The links will be in the description. Bob Neely was a 10th overall pick that same year and played over 200 games for the Leafs and looked like he was about to break out but never hit the next level. But a third first-round pick that year, Ian Turnbull, did produce significantly for Toronto. And while we get ready for the 1981-82 season, he's 15th overall and is about to enter his 9th season. Well, in 1974, center Jack Valiquette was picked and had a decent rookie year but never evolved in Toronto. He would have some pretty good years in Colorado, but then wasn't even playing hockey anymore by the time of the beginning of this coming season here. Some guy named Brian Trottier was taken second round, but to be fair, almost every NHL team passed on him before the Islanders finally got him. They did get Tiger Williams later in the second round, and Don Ashby played 141 games for the Leafs, but sadly his career never panned out, even in Colorado or Edmonton, and he would tragically die in a car accident in May of 1981. To be fair, the 1975 draft class was weak all around and produced maybe no Hall of Famers. Can't fault the Leafs there. In 1976, their pick was traded to Montreal, who they squandered on Peter Lee, so the Leafs didn't really miss out on that much. Their second-round pick was Randy Carlyle. Great choice! I mean, in 1980-81, he won the Norris Trophy as league's top defenseman, as part of the Pittsburgh Penguins. Oh, and the Lady Big winner that year was Rick Kehoe, also once a Leaf, and also part of the Penguins. In 1977, a pretty good pick with John Anderson, and he's on this 1981-82 Leafs team. He's had trouble evolving. You're going to hear that a lot. The pick right after was also belonging to the Leafs, Anderson's teammate on the Toronto Marlies, Trevor Johansson, who again never developed into much, played 119 games for the Leafs, and ended up where it seems all prospects went and died, and that's the Colorado Rockies. And 3 picks later, Mike Bossy. Their 1978 first-round draft pick was sent to Detroit. That pick was Brent Peterson, who was a solid hand and played over 600 NHL games. Their second-round pick, hey, Joel Quenneville, very traditional defenseman who, you sent him to Colorado with Lanny McDonald. Oh, but 1979, one of the greatest draft classes of all time, and the Leafs picked Laurie Boschman. Now, hey, on paper, this acquisition is great. He had 149 points and provides some size up front and some grittiness, and, he spends his fair share of time in the penalty box, but either way, he adds toughness and a scoring touch. Although his first 2 NHL seasons lacked any real discipline, he still could add something to the team, but taken after him were defensemen Paul Reinhart and Brad McCrimmon, who definitely could have given Salming more support that he definitely needed at this point. Also, Boschman's Brandon Wheat King's teammate Brian Propp, as well as future Hall of Famers Michel Goulet and Kevin Lowe were taken after. There was no first-round draft pick in 1980. As you can see, the Leafs were making some mistakes, but at least they were taking some good picks on paper and squandering others in later rounds, and their player development system was kind of a joke, even though their minor league team was kind of having some success. Kind of weird how that worked out. But hey, perhaps Punch Imlach will use his smart stomach at a big splash 1981 draft. And hey, Jim Benning of the Portland Winterhawks, this is actually a huge grab. Benning was ranked the top defenseman among Central Scouting, and is definitely what Salming needs right now to give him the support that he so desperately so needs. And now again, this is what I mean by drafts. On paper, Benning was the best pick for the Leafs. They wanted a defenseman, even ranked better than future Hall of Famer, taking 9 picks after him. Al McInnes. But Scott Stevens once said it best, I believe, and that is that the development of defensive players to even come close to perfecting the game, it takes longer than most. And Benning at 18 was going to be rushed on the roster. Some felt he wasn't ready fundamentally. The remaining players in the draft would play a combined total of 43 games for the Leafs. Now, okay, look, I get it. Not every draft class is a winner for any team at any given point to pan out, but these guys barely even had decent minor league careers. Then that has to say something, again, about the Leafs player development. Well, the Leafs are hoping to add more depth to their team and made a trade-in effort to do so. On August 10, 1981, the Leafs sent Bob Gladney, a defenseman in their system who was not panning out, and a 6th-round draft pick in 1983 to the LA Kings for veteran forward Don Luce. Well, Luce was always a reliable scorer with great defensive and checking capabilities. Many years with the Buffalo Sabres, reaching 25 or more goals 5 times, and reached more than 55 points 6 times. He was a big part of the Sabres' glory in the mid-'70s and was a big part of their run to the finals back in 74-75, but many felt this deal was Imlach, simply going to a guy he was familiar with and not really doing what was best for the team. In 855 games, he had 221 goals, 324 assists for 545 points. It was a career plus 202, a great number, as he also had a great deal of presence on the ice. He also won the Masterton Trophy in 1974-75, the same year he played in the Stanley Cup Finals. In 1980-81, however, his scoring touch had diminished, but still had a respectable plus 10. But he was traded from Buffalo to LA and did very little on the West Coast. The trade ended up doing little for Los Angeles. Their 6th-round draft pick, however, was future All-Star Kevin Stevens, who the Kings would actually squander in a bad trade, and before he even played a single game for them, as again Stevens went on to start with Pittsburgh. The Leafs would also trade goaltender Paul Harrison, who spent most of his time in the minors in September, to Pittsburgh for a 4th-round draft pick. Trade that was pretty inconsequential. And also the second Canada Cup took place that September, and the Leafs only had one representative, and that was Borje Salming playing for Sweden. Back in '76, Salming was named to the Canada Cup All-Star team, but didn't play a standout tournament. Darryl Sittler, who was the hero in the first Canada Cup, didn't even make the squad as he was there in training camp. And as the Canada Cup tournament was taking place in September and training camp in Toronto commenced, Punch Imlach suffered another heart attack, the third he's ever had. His days as GM were pretty much done, even though he was never officially fired, and they allowed his contract to run out. He was replaced by Gerry McNamara, the Leafs' former director of scouting and resident lapdog for Harold Ballard. The head coach was Mike Nykoluk, who took over as coach for the Leafs during the halfway point of the season last year, as he seemed to get some results towards the end of the season, so we'll see how he'll do in his first full season as coach. It's anyone's guess. Well, how this team will do at this point isn't looking great on paper, but the fact is this team's steady decline, they haven't missed the playoffs since the 72-73 season, and perhaps they can still slip in there with the losing record. They had talented forwards, no question. Darryl Sittler was entering his 12th NHL season and was still among the elite forwards in the NHL, but yet he was very unhappy with his team's status. Rick Vaive had proven to be a very welcome presence on the team as he obtained 33 goals in a very gritty fashion the year prior. Will Paymont, speaking of grit, also had a scoring touch and had 97 points, but the team seemed to have enough of that already among their top scoring forwards. You also had Bill Derlago, who came over in the Vaive trade. He had 35 goals the prior season. The Leafs were still hoping John Anderson could come around, as well as Laurie Boschman. They also had another reliable scorer back in his day, 1/3 of the French connection from Buffalo, all-star winger René Robert, who again, Imlach drafted. A reliable 20-goal scorer in Terry Martin, and now you had Don Luce. Well, also you can throw in second-rounder Gary Yaremchuk to begin the season, and there were still high hopes, again, like I said, for Laurie Boschman. The Leafs had a decent 8th overall in goals scored in 1980-81, but where was the depth? Guys like Rocky Saganuk, Dan Maloney, and Ron Zanussi seemed to be great at collecting dust sometimes when they were on the ice. Pat Hickey, he was okay, I guess. This is the backbone of your team. Just imagine Montreal in the 70s without guys like Gainey, Tremblay, or Jarvis. Just imagine the Red Wings in the late 90s without Draper and McCarty. Guys like that matter, and the Leafs didn't seem to grasp that. And their defense, well, hey, you had one of the best in the world, Borje Salming, who in all 8 seasons he has played has gotten the Norris Trophy votes many times, and has been a finalist 4 times, and he has been a second-team All-Star 5 times and a first-teamer once. And now they also got Bob Manoff from the Vancouver Canucks, who could have potential. And, of course, their number 1 prospect, Jim Benning. But is he being rushed into a situation he's not ready for? You have another rookie, Fred Boumistruck, who, again, had a great year in Cornwall in the OHL. You had tough rookie Bob McGill, as well as another tough one in Barry Melrose, who's playing in his 3rd season. And the only other veteran Salming really had to work with was longtime teammate Ian Turnbull, who was coming off a pretty good 66-point season. It was also a minus 18. Let's just say Turnbull plus-minus was never very good. This defense was young other than Salming and Turnbull, and that could turn out to be a problem. In net, you had veteran Michel Bunny Larocque, a great backup goaltender in Montreal for many years, who did okay in Toronto late last season. And Vincent Tremblay is going to get more of a chance this year, as the Leafs have lost one of their top goaltenders from the year prior, Jiri Sirha, who went back to Europe. And of course, but like that being said, being their best goaltender in 1980-81 is like saying the napkins are good at a bad restaurant. The Leafs gave up the 19th most goals in the NHL last season out of 21 teams and went through 5 goalies. But either way, October was here, and can the Leafs get something out of this season? Well, the season opened at last on October 6, 1981 in Winnipeg as they take on the Winnipeg Jets, a team who won all of 9 games the year prior, but now had the top junior prospect in the world, Dale Hawerchuk. And the Leafs looked excellent here. Rick Vaive had 2 goals and an assist, while Terry Martin and Bill Derlago each had a goal and an assist, while Salming and the Leafs defense overall looked pretty solid. With a great game from Bob Mano and an excellent debut from Jim Benning. And Annette Tremblay was making some nice saves. It's a 6-1 win to open the year. The defense, however, fell apart 2 days later in Minnesota against the Stanley Cup finalists from last year, the Minnesota North Stars, so thankfully Bunny Larocque was there to make 43 saves in a 3-3 tie that saw the Leafs let a 3-1 lead in the third slip. The Leafs finally had their home opener on October 10, 1981 against longtime Original Six rival, a middle-of-the-road Chicago Blackhawks team, and this was a wild game to say the least. A 9-8 win for the Leafs. John Anderson delivering on the night of his career. 2 goals, 3 assists for 5 points. Bob Mano, a goal, 4 assists, 5 points. It was a +6. And Salming scores the first and only hat-trick of his career, adding in an assist. It went 3-1 Leafs, 4-3 Hawks, 6-5 Leafs, and then 8-6 Leafs, then 9-8 final. The early consensus seems to be the Leafs are looking together and the top guys are producing, but the defense is somewhat questionable outside of Mano and Salming. But hey, 2-0-1, not at all bad. Not nearly as bad as this 6-game winless streak they'd go on. Yeah, they didn't look all that bad in a 2-1 loss to Minnesota, simply running into a hot goalie. And John Anderson continues his hot streak, and Rennie Robert plays his first game of the year. Then it's we interrupt this slew of failure with a news bulletin. On October 16th, the Leafs made a trade getting rid of utility forward Pat Hickey to the New York Rangers for a 1982 fifth-round draft pick. That draft pick ended up being Sylvain Charland, who never played a single game in the NHL. To be fair, Hickey would only play 53 games for the Rangers and would be placed on waivers later that season. We now return you to our tribute to the below average. A brutal outing in Quebec against a rising Nordiques club. The Leafs are down 6-1 after 2, but thanks in large part to Vaive, they make a game out of it after Larocque is pulled and they lose 6-4. Melrose and Boulogne-Struck are particularly bad. And they look slightly better in a 4-4 tie with the annually pathetic Colorado Rockies, showing that former Leaf Lanny McDonald just who's great, as McDonald actually has 2 goals. And Sittler had his first big game of the year with 2 goals as himself. Salming had 3 assists, but Boulogne-Struck and Turnbull play very brutally and Vaive is off his game, but either way, they fight to get a point. Fight was something he really didn't have against the Sabres in a 6-2 loss. Larocque is bombarded with 43 shots. And man alive, it's good that Barry Melrose has later found something that he was good at, because he was terrible again here. And no, I'm not referring to the one good year he had as a coach either. They then host a struggling Rangers club, and Pat Hickey makes it 4-0 Rangers. That's right, playing against his former team. The Leafs attempt to come back, but fall short 5-3. Jim Benning is not emerging as an instant star. Fans and media, of course, coaches were hoping for, as are already on his case. The Leafs then fall behind 4-0 again, this time just over 12 minutes into the game, and Vincent Tremblay stays in net. The Leafs again make a game of it, but lose 7-5. Terry Martin has 2 goals, but to no surprise, Salming is still playing better than just about anyone else. It didn't help that Vaive was out of action for the previous few games. The misery at last came to an end against a sluggish Penguins team on the road. A wholehearted team effort where Mano, Martin, Paymont, Salming, Anderson, Saganat, Derlago, and Sittler were all stand-up performers, and so was Vincent Tremblay with 30 saves in net. Also, Don Luch suits up for the first time as a Leaf, and it's the most cohesive they look so far. This could turn out to be great! The Leafs then hosted a team that they began the season beating the Winnipeg Jets, but the result is much different, as this Jets team is actually already showing significant improvement, but then again, it's not hard to do that when you only had 9 wins the year prior. The Leafs actually led, however, 3-2 in the second, but the Jets roared back and took a 6-3 lead by the third. The recurring theme of the Leafs making a game of it before losing happens again, as they lose 6-5, as Anderson, Saganuk, and Derlago all play quite well, and Vaive returns to action. The Leafs didn't look stellar, but that's not really surprising, as they sit in dead last with their 3-6-2 record in October. It was good enough for a mere 8 points. This is the first year of the new divisional realignment, I should point out, meaning that the playoff berths are by division only at this point all the way up until 1993 for the last time. The top 4 make it, but the season is still early, and in the past couple seasons, the Leafs have looked this rough more than once. So again, we're far from the impossibility of playoffs here. Leading the Leafs in overall scoring was a man trying to prove himself this season, John Anderson. He had 13 points in late October, and his 9 goals were the best on the team, including that career 5-point game against the Hawks. It was a superb +8, a breakout month for Anderson. Darryl, Sittler, and Borje Salming were tied just behind him with 12 points each. Sittler was playing well, but some were seeing his dominant presence was, he was diminishing. Salming was clearly the best player on the team, no question about it. His 12 points and his +12 shows the presence he still provides on the ice. Wolf Paymont played well in some games, as did Bill Derlego and Laurie Boschman, the latter of whom seems ready to break out, while Rick Vive actually had a very disappointing first month. Rennie Wobert was playing decently, but lost his scoring touch, it seemed, and role players such as Rocky Seganuk and Terry Martin stepped it up a bit, but overall this team just really needs to come together in terms of their forwards. Salming's +12 was very impressive and very much par for the course with him. And of course, his 12 points leads all defensemen, and that includes his first career hat trick. But he did have a lot of support from breakout star Bob Mano, who had an excellent month leading the team with a +13, and a welcome presence on the power play to boot. His 9 assists were also tops in the team for October. The 2 were the defensive forces. Ian Turnbull wasn't too bad, but really wasn't providing much spark. Neither was top prospect Jim Benning, but his game still needs to be built, obviously, while Fred Bloomstruck and Barry Melrose seemed like they needed to Google search to find that damn puck. Goaltenders Vincent Tremblay and Bunny Larocque were both let out to dry in many games and had the same not-so-great goals against average of 4.64. However, Tremblay was starting to show promise in that, and he was making some very big saves. Indeed, October was rough, but we can only hope for a better November, right? Right. Eek. A 9-4 loss to the Chicago Blackhawks on the road. Larocque couldn't stop a 200-year-old turtle in this game. Despite this, John Anderson continues to roll. Derlego plays another big game. However, Salming and Mano play their worst games of the year so far. The Leafs didn't have a few days off, which I'm sure benefited Ballard as he and King Clancy discussed what kind of leash to get Gerry McNamara for Christmas, while head coach Mike Nykoluk gets a new duster to clean up Barry Melrose after shifts. And they do look better on the road against Edmonton. They were down 3-1 and made it a 4-4 game, but lost 6-4 thanks to that no good punt kid from Brantford. Derlego stays hot. Vive plays one of his better games this year as well. They followed that up with another 4-4 tie with the Rockies. Tremblay faced more shots than a 19-year-old at a strip club on his birthday, but stopped 43 out of 47. Derlego continues to stay hot, and the Leafs actually erased a 3-1 deficit in the game. But wow, look at this, their most emphatic win of the year, 9-4 thrashing over the Kings. A monster night for Derlego, 2 goals and 2 assists for 4 points. Vive is a 3-point night that includes 2 goals, while Anderson continues to play well with 2 goals of his own. And big games from McGill, Boschman, and Mano, while Tremblay is however hurt in the win, but he won't be out for too long. But be that as it may, the Leafs are getting high praise for this win, as Derlego's play as of late is making positive headlines in the Toronto sports media. And on November 11, 1981, the Leafs make another trade. Gerry McNamara, taking a break from doing Ballard's crossword puzzle for him, dealt longtime defenseman Ian Turnbull to the team they just humiliated, the LA Kings, in exchange for veteran forward Billy Harris and young defenseman John Gibson. The fact is, Turnbull may never have been a great defenseman, but he can rack up some good offensive numbers, but he's not doing much of that this season, so this wasn't a terrible move for the Leafs to make. Gibson only had 10 NHL games under his belt, but did have significant minor league experience in the CHL and IHL, and 79 games with the Saginaw Gears of the IHL. He had 13 goals and 43 assists for 56 points and 375 penalty minutes. For the CHL, splitting time between the Birmingham Bulls and the Houston Apollos, he had 19 points in 49 games and 136 penalty minutes, and they feel he can bring toughness to the defense, so let's hope he'll thrive under a solid player development system that, oh yeah, right, he's in Toronto. Anyway, veteran Billy Harris was a good grab for the Leafs, now in his 10th NHL season. He was actually the first ever first-round draft pick for the New York Islanders back in their expansion year in 1972. He helped them grow as a contending franchise, was key in their growth. He had spent most of his career with the Islanders, but since late in the 1979-80 season, he's been with the Kings. Overall, he has played 751 career games, has scored 211 goals, 298 assists for 509 points, and is a +32. He has reached the 20-goal mark 7 times and has reached 60 or more points 4 times. He has 37 points in 67 playoff games on top of that. His scoring touch has seemed to have diminished as he struggled so far in the 81-82 season during 16 years with the Kings, but can hopefully still provide some depth. Turnbull would only play 42 games for the Kings and would only play 48 total as an NHL player before retiring after the 1983 season. The Leafs, returning home from their road trip, had a game that day against the New York Islanders. The two-time defending Stanley Cup champions, the Leafs put up a great fight, but again, Tremblay had little relief, and the Leafs even had a 3-2 lead in the third, but ultimately lost with 1:08 to go. The Leafs looked like a well-oiled bunch in a win over a very talented Philadelphia Flyers team in a 4-0 win over them, where Tremblay obtained his first career shutout. Salming played a beauty, as did Boschman, playing the best game of the year so far, and Harris, playing his first game as a Leaf, gets a goal. And in the last 3 games, the Leafs seem to be more focused and more disciplined than they've been even in the early portion of the season. Yeah, things look good, and then they faced another 6-game winless streak. First, an 8-5 loss to Hartford. Harris and Paymont faced harsh criticism over their play on that one. Tremblay couldn't save a penny on this night. They managed to fight to a close-knit back-and-forth tie with the Penguins, however, the following game. And hey, take comfort, Leaf fans. Even in 1981, they were blowing leads against the Bruins. This was a 3-1 lead in a 5-3 loss. Then a lifeless 6-3 loss to the Flyers. Tremblay again getting bombarded as his defense overall is just not gelling. However, they do gel well on a 3-3 tie, with the Rangers giving LaRock some breathing room. And they also managed to raise a 4-2 deficit and tie a very good Sabres team 4-4. Terry Martin had 2 goals in the game. And hey, 3 points in 6 games. That's like half a point a game. I'm sure it's a moment so joyous that Harold Ballard turned to King Clancy and said, "Say, King, if I were to say Darryl Sittler's head looked like a Brillo pad, would you join me in a laugh?" "Sure, I can go for that." "Okay, here goes. Darryl Sittler's head looks like a giant Brillo pad." Laughter ensued. Anyway, an actual joyous moment does take place. The Leafs break the skid with a win over the Red Wings. 6-3 win on the road. And Anderson has a 3-point night. And Derlego, who has been one of their best players all month, scores 2 goals. Salming has 3 assists, and the Leafs end the month on a high note. Well, the good news is the Leafs' November record is 2 more points than last month, with the same amount of wins and losses, but more ties. Hey, a tie is not a loss, right? Am I right? Yeah. I will say, and you won't hear me say this often, to their credit, they did look pathetic in some games, but there were even many losses where they seemed in the thick of things, where things were very competitive at the very least. And despite still sitting in dead last, they're only 2 points back of 4th place St. Louis in what would be the final playoff spot. Bill Derlego had one of the best months of his career, 17 points in 13 games, and played a lot of beauties in this month, whereas John Anderson continues to roll, at last having the breakout year that everyone was hoping for, while Will Paymont stepped up his game with 14 points. Also, Anderson is the only top 3 scorer from October to return this month. Sittler, while playing well for the most part, just doesn't seem to be the force he once was, and the media is making that very known, albeit not criticizing him too harshly while saying it. Rick Vive had a much better November. Also, Boschman, Martin, and Saginaw all played fairly well too. All the while, Billy Harris, battling injuries and inconsistent play, doesn't seem like the good grab it looked on paper. On the defensive side of things, and lo and behold, Salming has the exact same offensive stats of 4 goals and 8 assists as he did last month, while also leading the team with a +6 in November. Bob Mano, who had a great October, was still pretty damn good in November, but was sluggish in a couple outings. Regardless, Salming and Mano are still carrying this blue line core, and however, Benning looked much better this month, and John Gibson, obtaining the Turnbull trade, also looked solid in many games. Well, goaltending, it was the same story. Tremblay was the better of the two, and making some incredible saves and facing numerous shots a game, and got his first career shutout to boot. And his 4.16 goals against average may be far from great, and it's an improvement over last month, whereas LaRock still has yet to win a game, and his goals against average is pushing 5. Ugh. The Leafs still had hope, but it faded pretty damn quick with a 5-3 loss to Hartford to begin the month. A team not all that much better than they were, or in some ways even worse than they were at this point. Tremblay again faced a busy night. But boom! The Leafs are looking pretty damn good in a win over the lowly Capitals, 9-4. Derlego gets a hat trick, the first of his career, and adds an assist for a 4-point night. Rennie Robert, who had been quiet all year so far, shows flashes of his Buffalo self and notches a goal and 3 assists for 4 points of his own, while Vive and Sittler have 3-point nights, and even in such a high-scoring game, Tremblay makes some more big saves. And they did this without Salming in the lineup, and to their credit, Boozstruck and Melrose played great as well. Hey, Ballard was so impressed, he leaned over to King Clancy and said, "After that, they deserve a bonus. You know, every year, a Tycat Outstanding Player gets a $10 gift card to either Harvey's or Swiss Chalet. Well, what do you say? I think that's good enough." Anyway, The Leafs followed that out with a very competitive outing in a 3-3 tie against the Jets. Sittler played another beauty with 2 goals. Robert continued to roll with 2 assists. Tremblay again was bombarded with 40 shots, but he stopped 37 of them. Yeah, things were looking in the right direction, and what the f***? An 11-2 loss to Washington. Wait, this is the Washington team they just beat 9-4, right? Thank God the Leafs were sucking wind so bad, even the fans with oxygen tanks were in danger of being in the building. Tremblay saw more red lights than rush hour in New York, while LaRock tried to say, "There's no place like home, there's no place like home, there's no place like home," over and over, hoping to wake up in Montreal again. All but 3 Capitals skaters got a goal, meaning Vincent Tremblay has a distinction of being one of the goalies to allow Rick Green's 43 career NHL goals over the course of his 15 NHL seasons. Hey, though, LaRock does end up back in Montreal, but he's still wearing a Leafs jersey, and they run into the Habs. And not only is Salming out, but so is John Anderson. They lose 6-2. All head coach Mike Nykoluk can do is hang his head in shame or just stare blankly as his team gets killed. I don't know. And, hey, great news. Anderson is back in the game against the Canucks, and the Leafs score 6 goals, and the Canucks also score 6. It's a 6-6 tie. Darryl and Mano each have 3-point games. Indeed, a 4-game winless streak, and then it turned into a 5-game unbeaten streak. Yes, starting with the Canucks tie, Terry Martin gets a hat trick against the Jets in a huge 8-4 win. Paymon has 4 assists, while Vive adds 2 goals, and Salming returns to the lineup. And wow, look at this, a low-scoring game, but the Leafs still give up a barrage of shots, but they still beat Chicago 3-1. Vive has 2 goals, and hey, he scores 2 more goals in a 4-4 tie with the Penguins. While Darryl and Mano each have 2 assists, the Leafs nearly lost, but Robert tied it with 1:21 to play on the power play. And hey, a huge 8-3 win over the Red Wings followed. Anderson again, a big night, 2 goals and an assist for 3 points. Darryl 4 assists, and Vibe another 2-goal game plus an assist. Holy crap, LaRock wins a game? The Leafs are looking really good, scoring a lot of goals, but still allowing a fair bit, but the defense is showing drastic improvements. Ballard is so happy he's going to name his chinchilla Vive. Yes, so who's going to break this streak? The Islanders? The Oilers? The really good North Stars team? The Habs? Nope, again, no pesky Whalers continue at the Leafs number and end their hot streak with a 7-3 win. LaRock faces 40 shots. And the Leafs sing the blues in a 6-4 loss to rival St. Louis, despite another hat-trick, the second of the month for Terry Martin. Hey, they end the month in a big way, however, another win over the Red Wings. This one 5-2, but bad news again for the Leafs. Salming is out, and so is Mano. That is not good. That is bad for the defense, and Boschman is out too, as the Leafs are dealt a slew of injuries and scratches, leading them to call up Fred Perlini, who had a goal and an assist, as well as Darwin McCutcheon and Norm Oben, who would stay with the team for most of the year, and defenseman Craig Muni. Sittler had 2 assists in the game, giving him 916 career points, all of which are with the Leafs, and it would be his last. The Leafs did have their best month yet at 5-5-3, and with the division shaking up due to teams like the Stars and Jets slumping and the Blues getting hot, the Leafs find themselves just 3 points back of struggling Winnipeg, who are clinging on to that 4th place spot. But now with the slew of injuries, call-ups, and send-downs, and their best players' relationship with the team now beyond repair, outlook did not look good for the new year. Bill Darryl continues to be their best forward. He had an incredible month with 22 points in just 13 games. He was surely becoming the forward the Leafs always hoped for. Rick Vive, after a rough start, improved in November and is now on fire this month with 14 goals in December and included 5 2-goal games. He, of course, led the team. Rennie Robert, showing that he's still that guy people loved in Buffalo for so many years after being quiet, emerges with a 17-point month. John Anderson battled injuries, but still stayed steady. Sittler again was consistent, but lacking that extra something. Paymon's play somewhat diminished, while Terry Martin had those 2 hat tricks. Boschman also battled injury, but also wasn't that productive when healthy. Vive also led the team in plus-minus with a big plus 13, creating a great presence on the ice. On the defensive side of things, Bob Mano and Jim Benning, the big rookie prospect, stepped up and Salming was out of action, and they tied the defensive lead with 10 points each. Salming was still in top form, however, when healthy, while Borje played some of the best hockey of his career so far that month and was a plus 11. Either way, still far from perfect, and despite injuries to Salming, this is the best the defense has looked so far this season. Despite their goals against averages being, still pretty bad, in the case of Tremblay, his numbers are par for the course as they have been all season pretty much. LaRock actually had his best month so far, obtaining his first win and garnering 2 for the month of December. Either way, these guys are facing more than 35 shots a game most nights. Yes, indeed. Darryl Sittler's relationship with the team had become so strained and so hardened that apparently back in November of this season, Sittler told the Leafs organization that he would waive his no-trade clause if they could work out a deal with either Minnesota or Philadelphia. His agent Alan Eagleson was in the process of trying to make this happen, but the New Year arrived and still no deal was made. Even with Imlach gone, his relationship with McNamara, while not terrible, was not rock solid in any way. He also didn't have much of a rapport with head coach Mike Nykoluk, and while Ballard put on a smile for the cameras with Sittler more than once, a good chunk of people likely salted of Assad, especially Sittler himself. I cannot say enough about what Darryl Sittler meant to Toronto fans. He was not only their most popular player, but what he accomplished on the ice to this day has him regarded as one of the greatest Leafs of all time. He was the heart of the team, a true leader, and while statistically he was still producing with 38 points in 38 games, everyone could see something was missing. Things were never the same after Roger Neilson was fired, and then Imlach's hiring and his constant berating, then the Lanny trade, his back-and-forth relationship with Ballard. This just shouldn't come as any surprise, really. Sittler may have recorded his last point as a Leaf on New Year's Eve, but his last game as a Leaf was on January 2nd, 1982. The Leafs lost 6-2 to Minnesota. It was Sittler's 844th game. No deal had been made yet, but like Frank Mahovlich 15 years before him, he was broken down mentally and just plain exhausted by this franchise, and decided to sit out until a deal was made. And in more bad news, Darryl was suffering some injuries. And indeed, the first game without Sittler and a large portion of their injured stars, mainly Salming and Mano, have returned, while Anderson is now again out of action as they faced the Stars in the second part of their home-and-home series, and it results in a 3-3 tie, and Oben had 2 goals. They followed that by erasing a 4-2 deficit to tie Calgary 4-4. They then get back on winning track with a 5-3 win at home over the Kings. A game that saw Ian Turnbull return to Toronto and get into a very intense altercation with Paymont near the end of the game and get dealt a misconduct. Anderson returned to action. Vive had 2 more goals plus an assist. Mano missed the game, but Salming played a biggie. They would, however, lose 5-2 in the battle with the Bruins. But then Anderson had a goal and assist while the Rock was shining in net in a 2-1 win over the lowly Rockies. Things again went in the opposite direction, an 8-2 loss to the Sabres, and despite Darryl return to action, it didn't help matters much. However, what does help, a huge win over the high-powered young Oilers, 7-1. It's crazy how this team, marred in mediocrity, can pull off such huge wins when not expected, and Norm Oben continues to be a rising star for the Leafs with 2 goals and 2 assists for 4 points. Martin Paymont and Vive each had 3 points, while Mano played a big game as a result. The Rock again continues to play great in net, as Tremblay is actually out of action due to injury. And then Darryl was back to form with 2 goals, while Robert, who hasn't been having the best month, garnered 4 assists. The Leafs are doing everything they can to keep on track, but on January 20th, the deal was finally made. Darryl Sittler was sent to the Philadelphia Flyers in exchange for Rich Costello, future considerations which ended up being Ken Strong, and a 1982 second-round draft pick. Let me see the suspense. Costello and Strong played a combined 27 games for the Leafs, not even half a season between the two of them. And the second-round pick, however, ended up being Peter Imlach, who ended up playing 417 games for the Leafs, had a great rookie season, and had some okay seasons after that, and that's really about it. So yes, they traded one of their best players in their team's history for a bag of pucks, as the cliche goes, to which Ballard no doubt said, "Hey, these pucks could help in practice. Am I right, Gerry?" "Oh, yeah, boss. Yes, King Ballard, sir." See, here's the crazy thing about this. Now, as the president of Punch, Imlach still lingers in 1980. We have to go back. The Flyers showed interest in Sittler back then, and they were willing to part with defenseman Andre Moose Dupont and forward Rick McLeish. Yes, Rick McLeish, a 7-time 30-plus goal scorer, including seasons of 49 and 50 goals. He had 70 points or more than 6 times, including a 100-point season. He ended up being a career plus 154 by the time he retired in 1984, and Dupont was one of the toughest defensemen in the league and was a career plus 302 when he retired in 1983. Both men are also top-notch playoff performers, part of those big Stanley Cup teams in 1974 and 75 with the Flyers. Now, call me crazy, but somehow this trade would have done at least much better, but nah, Ballard and Imlach gotta have it their way. Anyway, the same day of the trade, which Leaf fans groaned mercilessly at and the media tore apart, they faced the Flames and fought to another 4-4 tie. Vive has another 2-goal game. Darryl plays well with 2 assists. Despite this tie, meaning the Leafs are now unbeaten in 4. It then led to a 6-game winless streak after the tie of the Flames, 4 losses in a row. First, a 4-2 loss to the Bruins, where Tremblay returned between the pipes. Benning returned to action, but made little difference as the Leafs seemed to be skating with cinder blocks on their feet in a 6-2 loss to the Blues. Maple Leaf Gardens was flooded with tears at a 9-2 loss to the North Stars, where head coach Mike Nykoluk was so mad he paced like mad up and down the bench. If only he shook his fist, maybe things could have been different. Now they looked better against the Jets, but still lost 4-3 and fought to a 2-2 tie with the rising Nordiques team. Down 2-0, however, with under 7 minutes to play. Oban scores, then Vive does that with 1:03 to play. And the Rock plays another beauty. The losing ways at least cease, and they end January with a 5-2 win over their struggling division rivals, the Chicago Blackhawks, 5-2, thanks to what would be the first of 13 career hat tricks for Rick Vive. The final 3 goals of the game came with 12 minutes to go. Vive assisted on the other 2 goals, so he was in on all of them. A career night for the youngster, soon one of the most popular Leafs players in the country. Darryl also had a huge night, also in on all 5 goals with 2 goals and 3 assists. Salming and Benning were on point with their defensive game. Yeah, well, not a great month by any means, but about par for the course, just about with last month. 5-7-4. The Leafs win over the Blackhawks, however, was a biggie, meaning the Leafs move into 4th place in the Norris. The Blackhawks' recent struggles have benefited the Leafs from keeping them in the hunt. And they only sit 4 points back of 3rd place Winnipeg, although they have regained their footing a bit lately. Either way, the Sittler drama, plus injuries to numerous players here and there, didn't seem to do much damage as we might have thought it would. Hey, Vive remained on fire with 12 goals and 20 points, both leading the team, as he is now the guiding force with Sittler gone. Paymont had a much better January than December with his 16 points, and Norm Oban, a new breakout star and a rookie, had a tremendous month coming up big in many games. Darryl and Anderson both battled injuries, but also weren't overly consistent when healthy. Robert, after a huge December, tapered off in production. The Leafs role players weren't all that stellar either. Harris and Luce were proven to be big flops. Also, the Leafs this season scored 47 goals in October in 11 games, 55 goals in 13 games in November, 60 goals in 13 games in December, and January just 53 and 16. Well, this could have to do with injuries, but perhaps it's a bigger problem. Mano again led all defensemen in scoring with 10 points, the same total as last month, a goal and 9 assists. Fellow defenseman Fred Boomstruck led the team with a plus-minus of +5, and was one of only 3 players, however, to finish on the plus side of things, and he indeed was a rookie much like Benning, but seemed to be thriving better overall this season. Salming's health issues reared their head, but he played well when healthy. The rest of the defense was abysmal as Melrose and McGill were a combined -17. John Gibson is not playing well and is about to be sent to the minors. Spoiler, his career doesn't really pan out. Tremblay missed most of the month, and despite a lowly 1-3 record, his monthly goals against average was the best it had been at just over 3.5. Whereas Larocque won more games this month than he had all year and played sensational in many games. His goals against average, however, still not great, but it's the best as it has ever been this year at an even 4. The Leafs began the month of February with a trade, as I'm sure Ballard gave a good yank on McNamara's choke collar to get something done. Well, he traded defenseman Greg Hotham, a defenseman who had been with the Leafs system since 1976 and has only played 60 games with the Leafs in his career. Looked to be on the cusp of being a big part of the team, but never quite got there. He sent to the Pittsburgh Penguins in exchange for a 5th-round draft pick in 1983, and future considerations would end up being a 6th-round draft pick in 1982. The latter didn't play a single game for the Leafs, and the former would end up being Dan Hodgson, but ended up playing 40 games for the Leafs before being shipped to the Canucks. While Hotham's career didn't exactly pan out all that great himself, the Pens still got 173 games out of him. Oh, that McNamara, what a genius. Hey, February's going to be great, though, eh? The Leafs are in playoff position, and then... a 5-game losing streak. Starting with a 3-1 loss to the Canucks, where the Leafs couldn't shoot a Super Soaker 50, let alone anything on Richard Brodeur. The Leafs then visited Edmonton and likely wish they would have gone to Red Deer instead, because the Oilers beat them 5-1. And they made their way to Calgary, where they were dealt the fate of an 8-2 loss to the Flames. And we interrupt this festival of suck to give you a news bulletin. Indeed, on February 9th, 2 Leafs were selected to play in the NHL All-Star Game, both for the very first time. Rick Vive, who's having a career year, and defenseman Bob Mano, who has been carrying quite a heavy load on his back. And Vive actually scored the opening goal of the game, even though the Campbell Conference would lose 4-2. We now return you back to your regularly scheduled losing streak. Then they lose to the Canucks 4-1. as they return home. But hey, the Leafs score 4 goals in the next game, and then Chicago, however, scores 6. The Leafs, however, set an NHL record on this night with most fans in the stands with paper bags over their heads. Congratulations, guys. Surprised Ballard didn't start selling them at the door. A 5-game losing streak, outscored 26-9. Vive, Derlego, Paymont, Oban, Anderson, Robert combined 9 points. Yikes. The Leafs look better as they settle for a 3-3 tie, a big team effort, not to lose, you could say. And the Leafs found themselves down 2-0, and hey, another game where they don't lose, a 3-3 tie with the Red Wings team that is actually gaining on them in the standings. While Mano and Paymont play well, the fact is the Leafs are now winless in 7 and have lost their hold on 4th place. Vive and Derlego have played terribly, and even Salming is running on empty, it seems. And indeed, they play the Red Wings again and lose. Now that's 8 games without a win, despite a 2-goal night from Derlego, but then... yes! A win at last! A huge A5 win over the Blues! Derlego, 2 goals, 2 assists, a 4-point night. Boschman has one of the best games of his career with a 3-point night. Saganuk even had 2 goals and an assist. And so did Vive, the last breaking his slump. Oh, indeed, the Leafs can still taste that playoff spot in their sights. They can feel the achievement of mediocrity above terrible. They can. In February with 2 losses and a tie, the Blues get revenge in a 3-2 win. The Rock puts on another show, but that's what happens when you're facing more than 35 shots a game. They lose 7-5 to the Stars, despite nearly coming back from a 5-0 deficit and 2-goal nights from Oban and Vive. And they did fight to a 3-3 tie with the powerful Habs squad. And again, had the game in hand until the Habs tied it with under 3 minutes to play. A super end to a super month. 1-8-3. Yes, they won 1 damn game the whole month. Yes, injuries to Anderson, Robert, and even Mano, Benning, and others missing games didn't really help, but this is just inexcusable. They now sit in 5th place, and yet they're far from out of it as the struggling Blackhawks only sit 6 points ahead, which can be a lot, but with 15 games to go, and the way this season has gone for the Leafs, anything can happen. But the dead things of Detroit still have life as well. Hey, the trade deadline's coming up. Speaking of bleak, this is just downright depressing. Yes, we have some familiar faces among the leading scorers. Derlego had a decent month with 12 points. Vive did well, but seemed below standards. And Salming tying Vive's second best 11 points, but was also an abysmal minus 12. One of the worst months of Salming's career in some regards. But the Leafs' goal total this month was even more depressing. In 12 games, just 36 goals. That's averaging 3 goals a game. In this era, oh, that just won't do. Anderson missed more games, but played miserably much of the time. Paymont was way off his game. Robert was hurt. Oban played poorly after his breakout month. Salming, as I mentioned, led the defense in scoring, but was not the best defenseman that month. Mano had a really good month. For the most part, even Benning played pretty good in some games. Hell, Barry Melrose even had a pretty good month, to his credit. But overall, the defense was still not very good. When your best defenseman plays badly, bad things happen. Although one of the best defensive players was actually defensive forward Stuart Gavin. Still pretty much a rookie, tied Derlego for the month lead with a +4. Oh, these poor goaltenders. Not a stellar month for either man. Tremblay, for the first time all year, fails to win a game in a given month, while the Rock got the only win of the month. Their goals against average still remain pretty much, the same. What more can you really say? So here we go, the final stretch. 1 more month to go. 15 games, 13 in March, 2 in April. Considering Chicago has many troubles on and off this season, the playoffs are still very much in the realm of possibility. And with the trade deadline over a week away, the Leafs can make some big moves, hopefully. As of now, the team is about as deep as a kiddie pool, and on top of that, Bob Mano was out of action. Let's make that 6 straight losses to kick off this historic March, shall we? First, a 9-5 loss to the Islanders. No big deal, right? I mean, 2-time defending Cup champions, bound to happen, yet Vive is a -4. And then a 4-1 loss to the Kings, who are every bit as good as the Leafs are. Oh, look, a 10-1 loss to the Islanders. Yes, but I mean, 2-time defending... Oh, who am I kidding? This is downright pathetic. But hey, at least Tremblay and the Rock shared in the loserdom together. They follow that up with a 6-1 loss to the Habs, and rookie Bob Perron gets to be the new victim between the pipes and getting his first NHL start, but he does stop 43 of the 49 shots he faced. We interrupt this plethora of pathetic to bring you a news bulletin. The trade deadline is just 1 day away. On March the 8th, the Leafs waste no time. They trade a 1982 4th-round pick and a 1983 5th-round pick to Detroit for Jim Korn. Aside from having a pretty cool name, he does bring some size and huge physicality to Toronto, switching up between defense and left wing. He has played 3 seasons in Detroit and 185 games, has 46 points, but isn't known for his scoring and is really not paid to do so. He is, however, a career minus 30, but early 80s Detroit, you get the idea. He has also racked up 458 penalty minutes, but clearly Nykoluk and McNamara want toughness. And hey, Korn would go on to play nearly 200 games to the Leafs and really not do anything of note but rack up penalty minutes and get in the auto altercation here and there. Also in the trade, Detroit's 1982 draft pick was Craig Cox, who never played a game in Detroit, but their 1983 5th-round draft pick was Joey Kocur, who had played 535 of his 820 career games as a Red Wing and went to Stanley Cups with them, as well as one other with the Rangers. And another trade is made. The Leafs are clearly fed up waiting for Boschman's game to come along, as if he's had any help, really. But indeed, they trade the former first-round pick to the Edmonton Oilers in exchange for Phil Drouillard and, Podebny. Drouillard never plays an NHL game before or after this trade. Podebny, however, despite only playing 4 NHL games in his career, does have an upside during his time with the Wichita Wind, the Oilers' CHL affiliate. In 131 games, he had 56 goals and 75 assists for 131 points, averaging literally a point a game, and he brings size and aggression up front. During the 1981-82 season in Wichita, he had 81 points in just 60 games. He'd play 176 games for the Leafs and have a really good rookie season, but kind of fizzled out. However, he would go on to have 2 really good seasons with the Rangers and 1 for the Nordiques. Boschman would only go on to play 73 games for the Oilers over the course of the next 2 seasons, but he had a tremendous career in Winnipeg, where he's best known, became a great leader there, and played over 1,000 NHL career games. We are not done yet. This one is a pretty big deal. The day of the deadline, March 9th, the Leafs have parted ways with one of their top scorers, Will Paymont, for Miroslav Frycer and a 7th-round pick to the Quebec Nordiques. Okay, look, Paymont has been inconsistent this year, but you traded a guy you just sacrificed Lanny McDonald, one of your greatest players of all time, for. You only got 187 games out of him, and he only played 1 full season, that being last year, where he actually had 97 points. However, trading him, I kind of get. But was it the right move? Well, the draft pick was Jeff Triana, who never played an NHL game, but let's look at Frycer. He's a Czech import who seemed to be fitting in quite well with his native countrymen, the Stastny brothers, in Quebec. His NHL career was off to a good start his first season there, with 20 goals and 17 assists, with 37 points in 49 games, but was a -11, and the team wanted depth for the playoffs. Well, in his home country, he was a star in Czechoslovakia. He was part of the Czechoslovak First Hockey League with 156 games played with over 100 goals and a total of 169 points. He also played in 2 World Championship tournaments in 1979 and 81, winning a silver and a bronze respectively, and represented his country at the 1980 Winter Olympics. Frycer would go on to have a good career with the Leafs, playing 329 games despite some injuries, was fairly productive. Paymont will go on to play 280 games in the Nordiques and would help in the 2 conference finals appearances, including this season. We now return you back to your regularly scheduled sad state of a hockey team. But hey, great news! After all the trades, the Leafs goal scorers come alive against Chicago, scoring 6 times. Perron, however, lets in 7 goals and is just playing crappy this game. Frycer in his Leafs debut has 3 assists, and Martin has yet another hat-trick, his 3rd of the year, and Mano returns to the lineup. But hey, the Leafs are back in form in a negative way in a 10-2 loss to the Jets to complete this double trifecta of terribleness, and they are outscored in this stretch 46-16. In the loss to Winnipeg, LaRock let in all 10 goals. Trevor Johansson, who used to be a Leaf and was picked up again off waivers a couple weeks prior to this, and sucks every bit as worse as he did before, maybe even more, is a -5 in this game, setting a record for assists in a season considering how much he sent out the other teams. This now means dating back to late February, the Leafs are winless in 9 games. The Leafs have now fallen 12 points back of 4th place Chicago for that last playoff spot with just 9 games remaining. And the Leafs would have to win at least 7 with any chance of getting in, and Chicago would have to lose at least that much as well. The Hawks have had many cold streaks this season, but the Leafs haven't had any really significant hot streaks. However, a huge win over the Nordiques as Will Paymont returned to Toronto for the first time since the trade. But the man they traded him for was the star. Frycer had a hat trick plus an assist, while Podebny, the man they got from Edmonton, had a big game, as did Mano. There's hope to be had yet. There's lots to be thankful for there. Yep, the Jets again dominate the Leafs. No goals to be found with the exception of the 7 that the Jets scored. And with Chicago beating Detroit the same day, this means the Leafs must win every game, and Chicago must lose every game, both with 7 remaining. For the Leafs to make the playoffs. Oh boy. Wait, what's this? Wow! Okay, well, they're on the right track, because they faced Chicago, who would have clinched the playoffs with a win here, but the Leafs beat them 8-5. And a historic night for Rick Vaive. Not only does he score 4 goals, but he has another point for an assist for a 5-point night, but with the 4th goal, that gives him number 49 on the year, breaking the team record set by Frank Mahovlich in 1960-61. Vaive gets a rousing ovation from the Leaf faithful, and it's well-deserved, as he's named the first star of the game. But they're still hanging on by a thread of their playoff hosts. And then the Leafs reach a huge milestone, 20 wins this season. And they do so in exciting fashion over the Blues. Rick Vaive gets his 50th goal, becoming the first Leaf to do so, of course. And with 12 seconds to play, Freezer scores the game winner. Truly epic, truly sensational, truly... Oh yes, I forgot, Chicago won that day, no playoffs for Toronto. This means for the first time since 1973, the Leafs are taking an early golfing trip. Get used to that sentence, fans. So, of course, this means for the remaining 5 games, the Leafs just roll over and die. Starting with back-to-back losses to the Dead Things, a 5-3 loss to the Blues, then a 6-4 loss to the Caps, where Benning actually had a 3-point night, and Derlego had 2 goals. And at last, it mercilessly all came to an end, being throttled 7-1 as they visit their old pal Darryl Sittler in Philadelphia and lose to the Flyers. So, yes, 3-12-0 for the 13 games in March with a 2 in April. The team was just drained and had nothing left, and there was no spirit or drive with the exception of Vaive. And missing the playoffs for the first time in 9 years and having one of their worst seasons in franchise history, this of course prompted Harold Ballard to say to King Clancy, "Hey, these guys are brutal. Do you think we could look into digging up Charlie Conacher in order to improve our fortunes?" To which Clancy replied, "Hal? Remember what happened the last time we tried that?" "Oh yeah, I forgot. He's dead." "Okay, well, let's just fire our scouts and not replace them, because who needs scouts, right? Gerry knows what he's doing. He's the best GM ever, and he's got me guiding him, right, Gerry?" "Oh yeah, boss. The draft coming up this summer. I say we draft Gerry Nykoluk and just forget about that Scott Stevens guy. And that Phil Housley, he'll never do anything either." Rick Vaive played a final great month with 20 points in 15 games, including a team-leading 12 goals, and was in command of this team. Derlego had a decent month, was second best in 14 points, while Freezer proved to be a good grab in the trade with just 10 points. But overall, this team's forwards were sad. Again, 47 goals in 15 games, better than last month, but still that's barely over 3 goals a game. Again, in this era, that just won't do, considering how bad their goaltending is. Not to mention, Anderson was not very good. Oben was a minus 13. Sanganek was always just as bad. This team as a whole is just sad right now. Speaking of sad, the defense had its worst month yet. Benning led all defensemen in scoring with a solid 8 points, but was a minus 13. Salming had a much better month than he did in February, but Bob Mano had another weak month. And Trevor Johansson, the former Leaf, who had just come back after a stint in LA, was an abysmal minus 15, worst on the team all month. Jim Corn, however, was surprisingly effective. And the sad thing is, the only player to finish on the plus side of this whole month in plus minus was new acquisition Walt Badubny, and his plus 1. Well, the Leafs allowed 88 goals in 15 games this month. That's nearly 6 a game. And these goalies, while facing a ridiculous amount of shots night after night, had nothing to show for, and these statistics are downright awful. Tremblay's last win was back in February, and while Larocque played some great games, most of them he was still allowing 5 goals. Rookie Bob Perron saw some action, but, well, needless to say, it didn't pan out very well. Yeah, there's lots of years or seasons I could have chosen. The 78-79 season where Neilson's time was ticking. The first year of Imlach's reign of terror in 79-1980. As bad as 80-81 was, the Leafs still got to the playoffs and hadn't truly hit rock bottom. This was the year they truly did for the first time. A team owner with an agenda that never suits his team, a GM in over his head guided by said owner, a coach who just seems unsure of what to do in this situation. The damage of this would lead to years of tumultuous times. The Leafs, I don't really have to tell you, have yet to even reach a Stanley Cup final, let alone win one, since 1967. McNamara made idiotic trades and bad decisions until his firing in 1988. Imlach, who never returned to work, as I said, sadly couldn't shake his heart problems and died of a heart attack in 1987. Mike Nykoluk coached the team until 1984 and never worked on this level again. As for Ballard, he passed away in April of 1990 at the age of 86. The Leafs, oddly enough, had their first winning record in over 10 years the year Ballard died. This year, however, is mercifully over, so now we go over the final stats. No surprise, Rick Vaive and his franchise record 54 goals, added with 35 assists for 89 points, led the team in scoring. He was also forced to assume a role of leadership after the departure of Darryl Sittler. He gave Leaf fans something to cheer for in what was a season that wasn't really worth cheering. It was a breakout season, his first of 3 straight 50-goal seasons. Out of the 7 full seasons he would spend in Toronto, he reached at least 30 goals every year. Derlago's second-best 84 points was a career high, as his 34 goals was just one shy of his career high in goals the year before of 35. He had reached 40 goals and 31 later on, but his career ended prematurely due to injuries. In third is Will Paymont, who is no longer with the team with his 58 points. He played a lot of bad games, ultimately leading to his trade at the deadline. The rest of the Leaf forwards were wishy-washy. John Anderson actually did have a bit of a breakout year with 30-plus goals, but sadly he tapered off later in the season and just couldn't stay consistent. He would have a pretty decent NHL career going forward, including some good years in Hartford, but again never became the superstar he was touted to be, and also himself retired at a young age. Also, acquisitions such as Billy Harris and Don Luce proved to be very feeble, as well as Rocky Saganek playing some games and Terry Martin playing some decent games as well. Neither one of them were very consistent and hadn't really proven themselves as elite in even their positions. Vaive's 54 goals was actually 5th best total in the entire NHL that year, as again, he being the first Leaf player to reach 50, stamped his legacy in Leaf culture forever on this season. Vaive also played for Team Canada in the 1982 World Championships, a somewhat famous 1982 team that won a bronze medal that year that also included Wayne Gretzky. Also on the team was former Leaf Darryl Sittler. Vaive was also the leader in plus-minus for the Leafs this season with his plus 12. In terms of defensemen, it's no surprise Borje Salming was their most consistent once again. With had 56 points in 69 games, he missed 11 due to injury. For the most part, he was producing and he was carrying this blue line along with Bob Mano. And indeed, Mano had a great season, but did somewhat taper off after the All-Star break and had some really rough moments. And the horrors of Toronto ran him back to his native Italy, but he did return to the NHL in the 1983-84 season, but with the Red Wings, and played 2 seasons with them, and went back to Italy where he played pro hockey until the mid-90s. Jim Benning looked to have promise, but sadly the Leafs development system failed him, much like many others. While he did play 6 seasons in Toronto and in the NHL until 1990, he retired from pro hockey in 1992, and is sadly a tale of what might have been. Same with Fred Wimmerstruck, who only lasted 1 more season, and while Barry Melrose, despite an awful start, ended up playing some really good games later in the season, but never had the career he should have. And bringing back Trevor Johansson, who are the ad wizards that came up with that one? Either way, the Leafs defense as a whole was just abysmal, and especially the likes of Bob McGill as well didn't help. Craig Mooney would go on to have better days in Edmonton, but either way, and Gibson, acquiring him in that trade earlier in the season, also never panned out. And these goalies, oh man. Vincent Tremblay did show some promise, but his 10-18-8 record and a horrendous goals against average of 4.52 doesn't show everything he probably could have done. He stood on his head a lot of games, but sadly he was a victim of circumstance in Toronto, like I was just saying, and like many young talents was swallowed up and died with this franchise. He did obtain the only shutout of the year for the Leafs, I should say, but he would only play 1 more game for them and 4 for the Penguins before retiring from hockey in 1985. As for veteran Bunny LaRocque, he too stood on his head many nights. He played 2 more seasons in the NHL and split between the Leafs, Flyers, and Blues, and spending 1 year in the minors before retiring in 1985. And poor Bob Perron. His only 2 games he got lit up, and would only play 1 more NHL game before retiring from hockey in 1984. Well, as you can likely guess, the Leafs didn't win any major awards, but Salming did get some votes for the Norris Trophy, finishing 13th. The next year he'd finish 11th and sadly would never receive any votes for the remainder of his career after that. And you likely already know or guessed who's in the Hall of Fame at this point of this team. Darryl Sittler and Borje Salming are the only 2 Hall of Fame inductees from this club. Sittler, who was inducted in 1989, played 3 seasons in Philadelphia, but sadly this team was a victim of 3 playoff upsets in the first round. He finished his career in Detroit and retired in 1985 with nearly 500 goals and over 1,000 career points. Salming stayed in Toronto until 1989, 16 seasons. He played 1 season in Detroit before leaving the NHL in 1990. He played for the Swedish national team until 1992 and was inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame in 1996. Sadly, as I was in the middle of making this video, he passed away due to complications from ALS, aka Lou Gehrig's disease, at the age of 71, just days after being honored in a very moving ceremony by the club. You'd think someone who's never liked the Leafs and has made many jokes about them over the years, I'd get some joy out of this, but really what I get the most out of this, making this whole video, is guys like Sittler and Salming deserve so much better than this. They gave their all to this club, and while the adulation of the fans was always there and never left them, sadly they ended up being part of a team that was run by people who were their own worst enemy. Well, that does it for our look at the dumpster fire that is the 1981-82 Maple Leafs. What other teams would you like to see us look at? Champs, chumps, contenders, pretenders, winners, losers, chokers, Cinderella teams. It's all fair game. Leave a suggestion in the comments below. And until next time, I'll see ya!